Are you going to retire?
No.
No. Doesn't it cross
What's
your mind?
that? No.
I talked to Richard.
Doesn't
about
cross
that.
my mind at
I
all.
talked to Richard about stopping.
Yeah.
He wrote something about
Yeah.
stopping. I didn't quite understand it, but he says it's okay to stop.
Mm.
And I said, well, are you going to stop? And he said, well, no. So, I mean, that's what I'm supposed to stop.
I'm sure it's okay to stop, but I wouldn't know what to do.
It would be very difficult.
It would be incredibly difficult to stop.
Yeah.
Well, I've never done anything else really all my life.
But what do you do when you stop?
Well, I just carry on doing it and pretend I've stopped.
I was interested in a conversation you had with somebody somewhere, which was talking about you had no expectation of a life in sculpture, that you were going to sell enough work to keep you going.
It wasn't that you didn't have an expectation of a life in sculpture. You had no expectation of a career. And people do nowadays. They have expectations of careers.
Yes, they do.
And I didn't think that.
No, it didn't.
And I imagine you didn't either.
No, I didn't. And you said
I didn't imagine I'd stop, but that doesn't mean that that I thought it was an economic proposition.
No, I didn't ever believe it. Actually, for me, it never has been. We go back to 62. You were both in my first group of students, 9 students. That was a long time ago. I can remember you saying to me some years ago that when you first met me, you were terrified of me.
I was.
And I've carried that with me always since then.
I'm not now.
You're not.
What happened was I was 17 when I started at Corsham, and we were in foundation year. And I met you, and you were 25, I think.
Right.
And I thought you were so old. And you were good, and you were good at teaching. And I remember.
What did I do?
Oh, you taught me.
This is a mystery to me.
No, you taught me how to make a wire armature and to use plaster. And I could never get the mixture right. And you'd come over and say, it's cheesy again. And I remember thinking, what does he mean? I was terrified.
I came to visit Corsham during my year in Wales. And that was the first time I met you. And I think that was 1971. You were a first year. And when we spoke, kind of introductory tutorial, you got very cross and I got very cross. And we had an awful conversation. But I can't remember what the bone of contention was.
You told me what to do, and I said I wouldn't do it. I spent most of the time at Corsham not doing what I was told.
Yes.
I was against any form of people telling me what to do.
You didn't do an MA, you didn't do further training, but you managed to get employment, get a job, build a career.
So I did my degree at Corsham as a graphic designer. And then I was very lucky. And Germano Facchetti, art director of Penguin Books, was my chief examiner. And he offered me a job on the spot at my exhibition.
I didn't know what to do, and somebody said there was a job going at the V&A, designing travelling exhibitions. So I, with my sort of innocence, walks in the front door at the V&A, said, I hear you've got a job going. I got a job as a research assistant in the circulation department, designing these travelling exhibitions. And that was fine. I was also trying to make sculpture. It was quite challenging, but then I thought, what the hell am I doing? So I then resigned. The next day I was called up to see John Pope Hennessy, who said, I hear you want to resign. And he said to me, you know you're working in the greatest museum in the world? And I said, yes. And he said, you still want to go and leave? And I said, yes, I want to go back to being a sculptor. And he said, you know, the British Museum's got a design department, So as a science museum, so as a natural history museum, but we don't. And I want you to start one. And that was, honest to God, I was absolutely gobsmacked.
We left college in '83 and we were planning to go to India for a year, and we then spent all our travel money doing up this shop and making this show. We put on the show and we did fantastically well. We got good press, we sold most of it and got our travel money back. And then at the end of the show, we took a truck and dropped off all these works. And then we buggered off for an entire year. To India. We got help from the British Council as well, so we would go from one big town to another, meet up with the head at the local art school and get to know people. And so we did all that. And then when we came back, I think there was a sense of everything had changed.
You decided not to do an MA. You did 3 years at Corsham, then that was it. Missing that MA, I have a sense that that affected the way you made your work. Perhaps it didn't, but you didn't get involved with the kind of London groups of aspiring artists. Once again, your route was individual, different, and I didn't follow the normal pattern.
I seem to have often been an outsider, so I felt I was swimming against the stream right from the beginning. And the idea of going off and just after college and making work was I wanted to see whether I could make a living or live by making sculpture.
You were a student?
Yeah.
You stopped being a student. Where did you go?
Well, the first place I went, I was lucky that I met up with Barry Flanagan. And then he just took me under his wing and he took me all round galleries and, you know, everything in London. And I just thought, well, this is just what happens, you know.
You're talking about being lucky, and we're talking about when opportunities or slim chances present themselves. You have to gird your loins or grit your teeth or whatever and have a go.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes wrong,
Yeah.
and sometimes it goes right. And the difference might be with those people who, presented with the same choices or chances, decide, no, I'm not going to take a risk. I'm going to wait for a certainty.
Yeah.
And the certainties often never come.
Yeah.
But I think that thing, taking a risk, is ingrained in us as artists, and more particularly as sculptors, because you know, to get to where we want to go is a long journey, and making, carving, constructing, and the risks are many. You once said, not to me, not long ago, that casting things in bronze was keeping you poor.
Oh yeah, it isn't now.
No. Oh.
But there is a point when you first start
Yes.
where you're just pouring everything you make into the next one.
Right.
But hopefully I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself now. Ahead of the game.
I think an artist needs to be sustained, and it's sustained by other artists, usually sustained by other artists. So artists are working, not packs, but groups. There's an idea of artists who talk together, help each other with their work, be critical, or generally speaking, they work on their own, in a studio on their own. And I think the views and opinions of their other artists, their friends, are welcome. That was the first sculpture that Ivor and Bridget bought from me. We tried to work out when, but it was certainly in the early 70s. Upstairs there's a sculpture of mine. I don't think it was studio made. I think it was made in my kitchen before I had a studio in Atworth. And you bought it.
Yeah.
And ever since then, from time to time, at salient points, you've bought my work. And we wanted to talk about that because it's not only buying somebody's work. I don't have many collectors. It's not the money, but it's the kind of continued support over the years. The fact that you will be prepared to purchase something, to give what you've earned for something that I've made, actually is much more supportive, has a greater effect than the pounds and pence. So it's an opportunity to bring this to the fore, to say thank you that we're surrounded. I feel very at home here because I'm surrounded by my own work and your work. But it's lovely to come and see to reacquaint myself with these things that you've bought from me. I made that and I exhibited an exhibition in London, in a park in London, and I brought it back to the studio and I was really very unhappy about it. I knew there was something wrong. And coincidentally, at that time, Richard Deacon was staying with us and we came to the studio and he looked at what I was doing and we talked at length about that work. And when I resumed back to work again, I modified it, I changed it, I simplified it, and I turned it from quite a reasonable piece into a good piece. And I think that interchange, that opportunity to talk to another sculptor or another artist and share views and opinions actually moved me along, moved me a step up the ladder. And looking at it this morning, yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, I think you've got a good one.
Yeah, we know that.
It smacks of that thing. It's not a brotherhood, it's kind of collegiate. That when you know other sculptors and you know how difficult it is and you know what they've got to put up with it and you work together and you help each other and you support each other. And I think that's what you do. And there's always that reservoir of goodwill. One of the characteristics of my friends and myself is that we were nearly all naughty students. And I think this idea of young people who do their thing and take risks with the authorities, take risks with their tutors or their heads of departments or the people who run the courses, and they do their things regardless. I think there are a whole list of interesting and exciting artists like Laura, like Andrew. My story is that I failed everything. Laura made a big name for herself because of the dog sculpture.
Yes, and of course I do, yeah.
The dog sculpture.
Very good sculpture.
She made a name and that came out of my teaching.
Oh, that's the original. So there's a bronze version.
I know there's a bronze version.
Downstairs. So it's really
It's my
beaten
little
up.
chap.
Yes.
I haven't seen you for ages.
Totally
have I?
beaten up.
Oh, you haven't been looked after, have you?
No.
Gosh, that is amazing, isn't it? That's incredible.
It's like,
That was
what
supposed
have
to
I
be.
got on my
That
back?
was supposed to be a pig.
Sort of big dog.
No, it was, you wanted to make a pig.
Did I?
Yeah,
Well, I didn't make a pig.
I know you did, but
But-
you wanted to carve a pig,
Yeah.
and that was one of those things which, the only thing I said to you of any value was make one in clay first.
Oh, right.
And actually, you didn't grumble. You did it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that led
Turned
to
into that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when it was made and
Oh, I
painted,
see. I seem to remember that now.
and
Yeah.
painted,
Yeah.
it was astounding. It silenced your critics.
Yeah, it did actually.
I think Laura in particular had a period of no success in the art school, and then after that she nearly got kicked out, and then she had a great deal of success. She was determined, like we all are, to show what we've got.
Laura was in her second year, I think, when I started at Bath.
Right.
She spent most of the time working on that dock, and everybody recognised it as good, and that she was doing something kind of interesting.
Very interesting. If you want to learn how to make sculpture, make sculpture. But in your case, if you want to learn how to make sculpture, make a chest of drawers.
Yeah. You've got to make it. If you're going to make it, you've got to actually make it. And maybe that's why I didn't do a postgraduate, because I just wanted to get on and do it, and felt that the sooner you get your hands dirty, the better.
I see Richard Deacon very rarely. Working with Richard Deacon a long time ago, being a friend of Richard Deacon, gives me support and strength to think that what I'm doing is worth doing. I think he probably thinks that what I'm doing is worth doing. Richard Deacon calls himself a fabricator because he constructs things, and he made something in sheet galvanized thin steel. And I made something in wood. Richard and I worked together. And during that period, we were, in a way, the center of attention. Anyway, we got on quite well, and he made this sculpture, and this sculpture is called The Heart's in the Right Place. And at the time he made it, he had on the title, For Michael. And that was and nobody's ever done that to me before. So that was quite good. So, do you remember it well?
Of course.
Do you?
Yeah.
It was extraordinary, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good.
It was
Good fun.
It was good fun. Yeah, I remember it very well. I remember all those important people coming to see you.
They were coming to see both of us.
Yeah, they came to see both of us. I was surprised at that. I remember David Sylvester coming to see us and telling me to paint my sculpture. It was red after the pillar box, and he said you should add some blue to it. I never did. I think you said then that I work on a sculpture until I finish it or it finishes me.
Now I produce a piece of paper which says, I'm never sure whether I finish the thing when I finish the thing I'm making, or whether it finishes with me.
Trying to make a decent sculpture is, after all, trying to teach a horse to talk. The artist's situation is very much like this story of Edward Cooper's. A man was condemned to death for treason, so he petitioned the king, saying, "If you stay my execution for a year, I undertake to teach your horse to talk. Will you pardon me?" Much surprised and pleased, the king agreed. Some time later, he met an old friend who said, "Surely this is very foolish of you. How can you possibly teach a horse to talk?" But the man said, "The year is a long time. You see, the king may die, or I may die, or the horse may talk. 60-odd years doesn't seem very long to me. Nowhere near enough time to teach a horse to talk or succeed in making a decent sculpture."
It's fascinating to think that when we first met, I didn't know anything about making art. And we think it's 48 years later, I'm now sitting with the person who taught me how to make art.